Writing. Long ago, in a kingdom surrounded by towering mountains and deep green forests, there lived a gentle queen whose greatest wish was to have a child. One snowy winter afternoon, as she sat sewing beside a window with a frame of black ebony wood, she accidentally pricked her finger. 3 drops of bright red blood fell onto the fresh white snow outside. Looking at the beautiful colors, she quietly whispered, "If only I had a daughter with skin as white as snow, lips as red as blood, and hair as black as ebony." Her wish came true before the next winter. A beautiful baby girl was born, and she was named Snow White. Sadly, the queen passed away not long afterward, leaving the little princess without a mother. Several years later, the king married another woman. The new queen was strikingly beautiful, but beneath her graceful appearance was a heart filled with pride and jealousy. She owned a magical mirror unlike any other. Every morning she stood before it and asked, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" The mirror always answered, "You are, my queen." Hearing those words made her smile, for beauty was the only thing she truly valued. As time passed, Snow White grew into a kind, intelligent, and graceful young woman. Her beauty was admired by everyone, but what made people truly love her was her gentle heart. She spoke kindly to servants, cared for the poor, rescued injured birds, and often spent hours helping elderly villagers. Wherever she went, smiles followed her. The people believed that true beauty shined from within, and Snow White possessed both inner and outer beauty. One morning, the queen once again stood before her mirror and proudly asked her favorite question. This time, however, the answer was different. The mirror replied, "You are beautiful, my queen, but Snow White is far fairer than you." The queen's smile disappeared. Anger filled her heart like a storm. She could not accept that someone else was more beautiful than she was. From that moment, jealousy consumed every thought she had. Unable to bear the truth, the queen secretly summoned the royal huntsman. She ordered him to take Snow White deep into the forest and end her life. As proof, he was to bring back the princess's heart. The huntsman obeyed, though sadness weighed heavily upon him. Snow White trusted him completely as they walked beneath the tall trees. She admired the flowers, laughed at playful squirrels, and believed they were simply taking a peaceful walk. When they reached the darkest part of the forest, the huntsman could no longer hide his sorrow. He drew his knife but found himself unable to carry out the cruel command. Looking into Snow White's innocent eyes, he lowered the blade. Tears rolled down his face as he confessed the queen's terrible order. Snow White stood frozen in fear before bursting into tears. The huntsman urged her to run as far away as possible and never return to the palace. He promised to deceive the queen by bringing back the heart of a wild animal instead. Snow White thanked him with all her heart before disappearing into the endless forest. The forest seemed frightening at first. Strange noises echoed through the trees, shadows stretched across the ground, and cold winds whispered between the branches. Snow White wandered for hours, exhausted and frightened. Just as darkness covered the sky, she spotted a tiny cottage hidden among the trees. Smoke drifted gently from its chimney, making it appear warm and welcoming. Inside, everything was unusually small. 7 little chairs surrounded a tiny table. 7 tiny bowls sat neatly arranged beside 7 spoons. 7 little beds stood side by side against the wall. Hungry and exhausted, Snow White tasted only a small bite from each bowl so she would not take too much. Then she carefully lay across the beds until she finally found one comfortable enough to sleep in. That evening, the owners of the cottage returned home. They were 7 dwarfs who spent every day mining precious gems in the mountains. They immediately noticed someone had entered their home. Curious, they searched every room until they found the sleeping girl. Instead of becoming angry, they admired her peaceful face and wondered who she could be. When Snow White awoke, she became frightened, but the dwarfs quickly assured her she was safe. She told them everything about the jealous queen and her escape into the forest. The dwarfs listened carefully, feeling great sympathy for the lonely princess. They invited her to stay with them as long as she wished. However, they warned her never to open the door to strangers while they were away working in the mines. Snow White promised she would be careful. Life soon became joyful again. Every morning, the dwarfs left for work carrying their picks and lanterns while Snow White cleaned the cottage, cooked delicious meals, washed clothes, tended the vegetable garden, and filled the house with cheerful songs. Birds perched happily on the windowsills, rabbits hopped through the garden, and friendly deer often visited the cottage. The little home became filled with laughter, kindness, and friendship. Back at the palace, the queen confidently stood before her magical mirror once more. "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" she demanded. The mirror answered, Snow White still lives beyond the mountains with the 7 dwarfs, and she remains the fairest of all. The queen was furious. She realized the huntsman had betrayed her. Determined to finish what she had started, she turned to dark magic. She disguised herself as a poor old peddler woman carrying colorful ribbons and traveled to the dwarf's cottage. Snow White remembered the warning and refused to open the door. The old woman smiled sweetly and insisted she only wished to give the princess a beautiful ribbon as a gift. Feeling sorry for the elderly traveler, Snow White finally unlocked the door. The disguised queen wrapped the ribbon around Snow White's waist, pulling tighter and tighter until Snow White could barely breathe. She collapsed unconscious onto the floor. Believing her plan had succeeded, the queen hurried away laughing. When the dwarfs returned home, they immediately realized something was wrong. They found Snow White lying motionless and quickly loosened the ribbon. Fresh air filled her lungs, and she slowly opened her eyes. The dwarfs were relieved beyond words. They reminded her once again that strangers could never be trusted. The queen returned to her mirror expecting victory. Instead, the mirror calmly declared that Snow White still lived. Furious, the queen created another disguise. This time she carried a beautiful jeweled comb coated with deadly poison. Pretending to be a friendly old woman, she convinced Snow White to try it. As soon as the poisoned comb touched her hair, Snow White collapsed once more. Fortunately, the dwarfs returned earlier than usual. They removed the comb from her hair, and after several moments, Snow White breathed again. The dwarfs pleaded with her never to open the door again, no matter what happened. The queen's anger became darker than ever before. She prepared one final plan. Using her strongest magic, she created a beautiful red apple. One side contained deadly poison while the other remained perfectly safe. Disguised as a harmless old woman, she returned to the cottage carrying the shining fruit. Snow White hesitated when the woman offered her the apple. To remove her doubts, the old woman cut it in half and ate the harmless side. Seeing nothing happen, Snow White accepted the other half. She took a single bite. Instantly, the poison took effect. She fell to the ground without moving. When the dwarfs returned home that evening, they searched desperately for a cure. They tried every remedy they knew, but nothing could awaken her. Believing she had died, they wept with broken hearts. Because she remained as beautiful as if she were only sleeping, they could not bear to bury her beneath the earth. Instead, they placed her inside a crystal glass coffin decorated with gold and flowers. They carried it to the top of a peaceful hill where birds sang softly and sunlight touched the clear glass each morning. Day after day, the dwarfs watched over their beloved friend, refusing to leave her side. Months later, a young prince traveling through the kingdom heard stories about the beautiful maiden sleeping forever inside a crystal coffin. Curious and deeply moved, he journeyed into the forest until he reached the hill. The moment he saw Snow White, he was struck not only by her beauty but by the peaceful expression on her face. He respectfully asked the dwarfs if he could take the coffin to his castle so her memory would be honored forever. The dwarfs reluctantly agreed. As the servants carefully carried the heavy coffin down the rocky path, one of them stumbled over a tree root. The sudden movement caused the tiny piece of poisoned apple lodged in Snow White's throat to come loose. She coughed softly, opened her eyes, and took a deep breath. Everyone stood frozen in amazement before joyful cries echoed across the forest. The dwarfs laughed and cried at the same time, unable to believe the miracle they had witnessed. The prince gently helped Snow White stand. She looked around in confusion as the dwarfs explained everything that had happened. Filled with gratitude for her second chance at life, Snow White thanked them for their unwavering love and loyalty. She accepted the prince's invitation to visit his kingdom, where they gradually came to know each other. Their friendship grew into true love based on kindness, respect, and honesty rather than appearance alone. Before long, a magnificent wedding was celebrated throughout the kingdom. People traveled from distant lands to witness the joyful occasion. The 7 dwarfs were honored guests, seated beside the prince and Snow White as members of their family. Music filled the air, children laughed, and the celebration lasted for several days. News of the wedding eventually reached the jealous queen. Furious, she questioned her magical mirror one last time. Once again, the mirror answered that Snow White remained the fairest of them all. Blinded by envy, the queen rushed to the celebration hoping to destroy her rival forever. Instead, everyone recognized her wickedness. According to the oldest version of the tale, she received a severe punishment for her cruelty and jealousy, reminding all who witnessed it that evil eventually destroys itself. Snow White and the prince ruled their kingdom with wisdom and compassion. They never forgot the kindness of the 7 dwarfs, who were always welcomed into the royal palace. Together they created a kingdom where generosity mattered more than wealth, honesty was valued above appearance, and every person was treated with dignity. For generations, people remembered the story of Snow White not simply because of magic mirrors, enchanted apples, or mysterious forests but because it revealed an important truth. Beauty that exists only on the outside fades with time, while kindness, courage, forgiveness, and love continue to shine forever. Jealousy can poison even the strongest heart, but goodness has the power to overcome darkness. That is why the tale of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs has been told for centuries, reminding young and old alike that true beauty is never found in a reflection, but in the choices we make and the goodness we share with others every single day.